We're in the trumpets, and we are into the fifth trumpet. We're going to have something that looks a lot like that, whatever that is. Or a locust with a scorpion. Yeah, so we'll kind of look at that. Starts off with an introductory statement and then moves on from there. So starting in 8:13 and then through 9:12, I'll go ahead and read this section. Here we go. As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet's blast about to be sounded by the other three angels." The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss, and when he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plants or trees, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not allowed to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes. And during those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battles. On their head was something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth like the lion's teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails with stingers like scorpions, and in their tails they had power to torment people for 5 months. They had a king over them, the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon, that is, destroyer. The first woe is past. 2 other woes are yet to come. All right. So, yeah, I can just kind of see, I don't know the horse feature of this other than they're standing up kind of like a horse, but everything else seems pretty accurate to what John said there. So, all right, verse 13, chapter 8:13. This verse serves as a transitional verse from the first 4 trumpets to the next 3. So we've seen this a little bit already. So there were 4 seals that happen in rapid succession and are very similar to each other, and then 3 other seals that are different enough. The same thing with the trumpets. We're going to have 4 trumpets that were very similar. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. If you don't remember it, go back and watch the videos. And then because I don't remember it either. So, and then we have 3 trumpets that are different. And these 3 trumpets have this idea of woe, woe, woe. All right. So we've seen some of this. This is just how it is. We're continuing to vision the Egyptian judgments, and we'll see that in a second. These last 3 are harsher judgments than the first 4. In the Old Testament, the announcement of the coming of judgment often included the use of an eagle. We see that in passages like Deuteronomy 28:49, Jeremiah 4:13, Jeremiah 40:40, Jeremiah 49:22, Lamentation 4:19, Ezekiel 17:3, Hosea 8:1, and Habakkuk 1:8. Of particular interest is Hosea 8:1, which says this: "Put the trumpets to your lips. An angel is over the house of the Lord, because the people have broken my covenant and rebelled against my law." What's that? What did I say? An angel? Oh, my bad. An eagle. Yeah. So where do we see the similarities in 8 to Hosea? The eagle is mentioned. What else? The trumpet, right? So we see these 2 themes kind of put together, and it may be the literary device that he's using here. John could also be alluding to Deuteronomy 32:11, where God notes that he bore the Israelites from Egypt on eagle's wings, in a reference to judgment and stuff. So while judgments are going to be harsh, God's people will be protected from them if they're willing not to compromise with idolatry with the world. So we're going to see that the people that are harmed are those that don't have the seal of God, right? And we kind of see that aspect of this. Then in chapter 9, we get to the blowing of the trumpet. When the trumpet blows, what happens? Lots of things happen. What's the first thing that happens? And a star falls from heaven. Okay. Yeah, that's a good all-star. Who did that? Smash Mouth song there. Yeah, so if Shooting Star is going to break the mold. So here we probably could say it acts like a meteorite for sure. Maybe a heavenly being because it's going to act, right? The star is given the keys to the abyss, and it's going to act like it. And so if we recognize that a lot of times stars are heavenly beings in Revelation, then maybe that's what's happening. A heavenly being is falling. It's given the keys to the abyss, and what does he do with that key? Opens the abyss. Sorry, I have a note here, and I was trying to figure out what I'm trying to say with it on my note and kind of go back to my real writing here. One of the things that you'll see throughout Revelation is that God is in control of the realm of Satan, right? Whatever Satan thinks he has, God truly is the one in charge of it. And we see that here, right? Because the abyss doesn't just get to open, but the person has to have a key. And the only reason they're given the key is because the trumpet has blown. And the only reason the trumpets are blowing is because God says judgment comes now, right? So it all comes back to God is in control. And so even though this is going to seem chaotic, really God is still in control of it all. We do need to ask, what is the abyss? Thoughts? Hell? Okay. Other thoughts? I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just asking. So we have to, again, recognize Jewish thought on the matter. And so abyss is not a Greek idea, it's a Jewish idea. And we see it in Job 40 in particular. In Job 40, we're told that the abyss is home to the cosmic sea dragon, okay, who has the appearance of the morning star. And so we could probably definitely see the abyss being the location of Satan or the devil. In other passages, we see to have it being synonymous with Hades. And Hades in Greek thought was the location where dead people reside. Okay, and so it can that's a part of it. But in the Jewish thought, it served more as the confines of evil spirits, so where evil spirits reside. And so when John says the abyss is open, I guess hell, but it's not really what a lot of times when we think of hell, we're thinking of the place where wicked people go to, right? That's not necessarily the same concept. And so the abyss is more of where wicked angels are, and they're released in this way. The last thing that happens is the sky is darkened. This is probably a reference to Joel 2, where we see something very similar. The darkening of cosmic lights is always used in biblical prophecy for judgment. Okay? We could also see the 9th plague of Egypt here, right? The 9th plague is the plague of darkness over the Egyptians. And if we recognize that, we can also ask the question, who was in Exodus, who was in the dark? Only the Egyptians, right? Like there seems to be a significant separation between the Israelites and the Egyptians. And so we're going to see that same separation here. The plague here, these creatures that are going to come out of the abyss, they're only going to attack idolaters, just like the darkness only affected the Egyptian idolaters, right? And so we're going to kind of see that playing out again. So I have here, judgment reserved for demons are now extending to idolaters. Okay, so again, one of the themes that we're going to see throughout Revelation is you should not compromise with the world, because if you're playing around with idolatry, lots of bad things are going to happen. All right, so avoid it. And one of these things is this stuff. Okay, turning to verse 3, we see some more things coming out of the abyss, out of the smoke. What comes?
Behind the second curtain was a room called...
You're in the wrong book or wrong chapter.
Oh, whoops.
Okay. Locusts. Yeah. Yeah, we don't talk about the Holy of Holies, I don't think so. All right, locusts, and I put a question mark here, right? What are the locusts?
The picture of famine.
Could, maybe. But these locusts, they appear to be locusts, and then he goes on and explains how they're not locusts at all, right? Like, hold on a second, were you here for the picture? There's the picture. So I've never seen a locust look like that, so.
It's like a centaur mixed with insects.
Yeah, it's something, right? All right, yeah, so what are these locusts? They were evil, yep, given to torment. I think that we probably are talking about demons here in some form, probably because they come from the abyss, right? And the abyss in Jewish thought was the location where demons reside. They are definitely opposed to God, but they also obey God, right? And I think we see this in Jesus' ministry. Every time Jesus tells a demon to leave, what does the demon do? It leaves. All right, and so we're again seeing this understanding that God is still in control even of the demonic realms. God is in control. And they recognize it, absolutely. Okay, we're going to see it here because they're going to be told they can't harm certain people, right? In verse 4 when we get to there.
Forces them to be a house divided against themselves.
What's that?
He's kind of forcing them to be a house divided.
Yeah, very much so. So here we'll get to it right now. It says that they're allowed to not harm the earth or God's people. And he says it that way, those who have the seal of God on their foreheads. And so that's why I don't think, if we go back to the 144,000, like, if that protection is just for that many people, it doesn't really make sense to why John would end up saying it here. Now, if we understand this to be God's people that have the seal of God on their foreheads, and all of us have it with the Holy Spirit, whatever the seal is, then this makes more sense. So not allowed to harm the earth, not allowed to harm God's people is what he's saying here. So I have that. Not a literal 140,000, but all of God's people. He's using that as a thing. We also see a mimicking of the 8th Egyptian plague, which is locusts. And it's a spiritualization of it. Okay. Now, one of the things that the Jewish writers of John's day were doing was spiritualizing the 10 plagues. In the Wisdom of Solomon, which is not a book we usually read, but in it says that the Israelites were bitten because they had no healing for their souls. So he says that the locusts killed the Egyptians because they could not find healing in their souls. And so that's kind of the idea here, right? They cry out for death, and death does not come. All right, and so we have this. So like the Egyptians, the idolatry will harden a person's heart, and so they will still not turn to God, even though they are having all these problems. verse 5 through 6 does have some limits on the locusts. What are some of the limits in verses 5 and through 6? Yeah, so they're not allowed to kill, right? At least physically. What's that? Yeah, and they also have the time limit, which Tori said that too. She said that under her breath there. So two things. They can't kill them, and they only are limited, okay? So here's a question. Why 5 months?
Wasn't that the amount of time somebody got tortured for it?
Oh, I have no idea. Maybe. So we have a lot of numbers in Revelation. 5 is not one of the ones we typically have. In fact, I think this is probably the only place it is. So we have to ask, why 5 months?
It's not real long, it's not real short.
Okay, maybe.
It's actually being specific,
What's that?
actually being specific instead of,
Maybe.
My Bible says it's like the life cycle.
Yeah, there you go. And in the real world, in the East, there's a 5-month period that locusts tend to do their devastation. And so that's probably just a reference to the real world for a moment. These guys have and so I think it's still spiritualization. I don't think it's an exact time period. I think it's him saying they will do what they do for the cycle of their life. And so I think that's probably what we should do this. The tormenting is definitely spiritual and psychological. I think behind this is Deuteronomy 28:28. So in Deuteronomy 28, one of the things that is said is that in the latter days, Israel will suffer the plagues that Egypt had, including the plagues of the locusts, because of their idolatry. And what will result, in verse 28, is madness, blindness, and confusion of the mind. And I think if we recognize that's what Moses was saying to the Israelites, if you follow idolatry, this is the result. I think John is saying the same thing, right? He's just using different terms. We can also probably argue that when a non-believer refuses to come to Christ, often it is the result of such demonic influence. We can provide proofs. They may even have gone to church for a time in their life, but life happens and they turn their backs upon the truth. And convincing such people is often difficult, if not impossible. And many times it's because they have been driven to madness, blindness, and confusion of the mind, at least on a spiritual level. John does conclude the section by saying that they long for death, but they cannot find it. Severe suffering often causes a person to desire death in place of a life of torment. We see this in scriptures on both sides, right? Like Elijah runs away from his mountaintop experience on Mount Carmel because Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you. And when he gets out into the wilderness, God sends an angel and says, what are you doing here? And he says, I'm all alone. I just want to die. And then he gets to Mount Sinai and God comes to him and says, what are you doing here? And Elijah says, I'm all alone. I just want to die. Jonah, after preaching to Nineveh, right, goes to the top, has a beanpole come up, beanpole gets eaten, and God says, what are you doing here? And he says, I want to die, right? Like we see this over and over again. And so here we're seeing it not with the people of God, but on the other side. And they're crying out for death, but they will not find it. Now, through it all, those with the seal of God are safe from this part of it. All right, verse 7 through 10. We've already read it, Rebecca. Sorry. She really wants to read. You can read the next section when we get there, okay? All right. In verse 7 through 10, we get a bigger picture of the locust. This is kind of the zoomed out picture. He's talked to us about locusts. Now we get this lot of descriptions in it. I will say in modern times, people have tried to say that John is describing tanks or other modern warfare machines that John did not have in his time. However, that would be to read modern ideas back into John's writing. Rather, we should recognize that the image is meant to communicate something original to the audience that they would have understood. The individual parts, so I don't think it's a modern reference to modern warfare. We shouldn't necessarily focus too much on the individual parts. I think the entire point, the bigger picture that he's trying to say is these things are terrible and you should avoid them. Right? Like if I saw one of those coming at me, I'd be like, yes, I'm going to go over here. Right? And that is to some extent the point that he's trying to do. So here's the question. How can you avoid these creatures? Someone said it. What? Having God's seal. Don't compromise with idolatry. Don't even touch it. Have God's seal and you'll be safe. Okay? So how do we avoid it? By having God's seal. So let's look at the individual elements. They do have some Old Testament backgrounds to them. First, we're told that they are prepared for battle. Battle was not something that anyone relished, yet it could bring you glory if you were to be the one that did some. So like the Romans, one of the things that they did is they rewarded the person who got to the top of the wall first. Right? So if you made it to the top of the wall, you got an extra day's pay or something like that. Like they rewarded you. They paid you extra. That's how they got people to charge walls, right? Now, there's no guarantee that you were going to survive getting on top of that wall, but you'd get pay if you did. So like there's glory involved in battle, okay? And so we see some of that. The image probably comes from Joel 2:4-7, which speaks about locusts appearing like war horses. We do see that. They also have the teeth of a lion, which probably comes from Joel 1:6. The lion's teeth speaks to its fierceness of these demons and the fear that they brought to them. If you've ever seen a lion roar in life, it'd be fearsome, especially if there was no cage in between you and it, right? I went to the zoo one time. I think Micah was still like 1 or 2, and he was on my back. And the zoo had there's one enclosure that I think it's the leopard enclosure that the leopard can come right up to you. And I saw it walking. I turned around to tell Emily to come over, and when I came back, it was right at the fence, and all it did was go. And I jumped back 5 feet, right? Like I'm like, oh. Like even though there was a cage, like he just wanted to make sure I knew that he was in charge. And that's a leopard, right? Like a lion is much bigger. All right, and so when you hear lion's teeth, you should think fierceness. Okay? It's clad in armor, which probably comes from Job 39:19-25. We're told about horses clothed in terror and perfect armor. A war horse is scary enough. A war horse in armor is a whole different level. And in Jeremiah 51:14-27, we also have Jeremiah speaking about trumpets and locusts coming like horses. So we've seen just this image of power that these demons have and the fierceness of them and the desire to really not be away near them. Verse 10 does note, again, the limitations, right? They're able to torment people for 5 months. So we have a combination of warhorse, scorpions that bring about this torment. Verse 11, we get the first mention of the main leader. All right, this is the leader who is called Abaddon and Apollyon, which is translated as? Destroyer. Yeah, good job. It's in the Bible. So that is translated as destroyer. This either is Satan himself or Satan's representative. We don't quite sure. Jewish tradition usually places both, either as Satan or as a representative of Satan. And so we probably can take that there. Abaddon also is equated with Sheol. In Hebrew, Sheol is the Hebrew word for the grave. We usually translate it as grave. I can't think of a verse off the top of my head, but in Psalms especially, we see this word pop up, and this is what it is. Verse 12 concludes and serves as a transitional verse. The first woe is past. The second woe is yet to come. All right, what do we learn? Sorry, I got two things. What did you say? We will be protected. The first woe is bad. That's why it's called a woe. What else? What's that? Make sure you have a seal. Yep. I put on here, demons have the power to torment non-Christians for a period of time. I think that's probably may be a key idea. And everything that's been said, if you want to avoid it, have the seal, woe, it's a woe. And I think it's definitely something to be not concerned about because we're Christians, but be aware of. And why our job is so important in sharing the gospel, because we want other people to be protected as well. All right.
Will we see that stuff going on around us then?
I think a lot of this is spiritual. I think we'll see probably the effects of it. I think we probably in our world right now see a lot of the effects, especially I think the devaluation of morality is definitely a result of that more than anything else.
I just saw it yesterday. They put up another statue of a demon for Ruth Bader Ginsburg in New York. I mean, it literally has golden horns going around. Its arms are like tentacles, and its legs turn into tentacles. And it's because she was so strong in the pro-abortion stance that they erected the statue. I thought, man, we are going into the abyss.
Yeah. The Grammys, I don't know if you guys saw anything from the Grammys this week, but they had, the song is called Unholy. So there's actually two songs out there that are very popular right now that I'm like, I don't think we should. Unholy is one. And I didn't watch it, but I heard some people like, I can't believe they did that. And I'm like, why would you not believe it? Basically I don't know all the details, but they dressed up as demons and sang this song and stuff. And it was celebrating, yay, great job. The other song right now that I think we have to be kind of careful with is Bloody Mary. Is that what it's called? It's from Lady Gaga. It's something with Mary. It's the Wednesday song. So like the song that Wednesday dances to. Bloody Mary. I think I thought it was Bloody Mary. And it is very, I'm not a Mary person, okay, but it is very sacrilegious in a lot of ways. And so when I hear my kids singing, I'm like, nope, we're not going to sing that one. So, and again, so to answer your question, Alicia, like very much like I think we see the results. Do we see it like literal demons coming at people like that? No, I don't think so. I think John's point is it's fierce and it torments them. And I think the reason why people are so antagonistic towards Christianity in their lives is because they're being tormented and it's hardening their hearts.
How do you fit in all this shooting and everything? People just going in and
That's just a lack.
Is it a demon possessed or something?
I mean, it depends on the person and situation, I guess, I think some of it's just like, yeah, there's hopelessness for sure.
When you have a lack of Christ, you're hopeless and you're just looking for a way out, kind of.
Yeah, a lot of them kill themselves after they.
Yeah.
The ones that have to take other people.
They want to share the pain that
Pain,
they have.
yeah. I think
I think the Super Bowl would be an ideal for some deranged person to go in and shoot up a bunch of people.
well, I almost, yeah, I'd be extremely surprised because So I grew up going to Colts games. My dad had season tickets, and before 9/11, like we could walk in. I mean, they did hardly anything. But the moment 9/11 happened, like all of the security is it's not at the gates. It's like, there's like, not blocks, but I bet the Super Bowl does have blocks of security. But there's a significant gap. Like it would, and there's lots of checkpoints to get through. And so like I can almost sure that it would be very difficult for that to happen.
They like going to places that are soft targets.
Yeah. Grocery stores, malls, yeah. Churches, schools. Yeah. It's unfortunate. But I think a lot of it is like Caleb said, a lack of hope, sharing the pain. I mean, there's a lot of pain in our world, and we don't know how to process. And again, I more and more, this is where I'm leaning towards on trying to explain what's going on in our culture. We've been teaching our people over and over again that they are perfect. You are perfect the way that you are. I mean, that's what we communicate to our kids. And then they grow up and they say, there's something wrong with me. What is it? And they can't figure it out. And so then they think that they're broken, which they are. I mean, the message of Christianity is we are broken and we need Jesus to help us. Right? But the world has been saying, no, you're good, you're good, you're good. And then they go and they do all this stuff, and it's just, I think we're teaching the wrong thing. And it's unfortunate.
So what should we say to the kids instead?
I don't think you can say you're broken, right? Like, I think you have to say, we collectively have something wrong with us. And we collectively tend towards darkness, tend towards evilness and wickedness. And we need somebody to fix that for us. And that someone is Jesus. And when Jesus comes and we surrender to him and his lordship, he heals us and he works with us to making us into a different type of humanity, right? Like you can either be in the old Adam or the new Adam. And the new Adam is better. And he's working in us into bringing that about because he is the new Adam. And we need to strive to be like him and be holy and perfect. But it only happens because of what he's done.
There is supposed to be some Super Bowl commercials about.
Yes. I've been seeing their commercials about him. Like, I haven't looked into the organization. It's like he is us or he is for us. Yeah, or he gets us. Yeah. And so I'm excited to see like kind of what they're trying to communicate and stuff. So
They were saying this morning that Hobby Lobby is a big one behind.
okay.
Is what?
A big supporter of the He Gets Us. So, yeah, I am excited to see theirs. I've been seeing some of their stuff, and I just haven't gone to their website yet to see. But yeah. But some of the things, that, they're talking to the broken people, because like some of it they say, hey, Jesus was a refugee. He went to Egypt because of what Herod did. And he says he gets us. And the other one is being poor. Like Jesus was poor. He gets us. So he's definitely speaking to the broken parts of our society. And I think I'm excited to see what they're going to do there. All right, we could probably get to this next one. All right, we're going to get horses with fire out of their mouths. Okay, and Rebecca, if you'll do the honors, 9:13-21.
The sixth angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice coming from the horns of a golden altar that is before God. It said to the sixth angel who has the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. The four angels who have kept ready for this very hour and day, and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. A third of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury.
20 to 21, please.
The rest of mankind that were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons and idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood. Idols that cannot see or hear or walk. Nor did they repent of their murders, their magical arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts.
All right. So here we kind of see some of this, right? Horses with lions. If lions weren't bad enough, these are fire-breathing lions. And then they have tails of snakes. I don't know if you can see the snake head there or not. So, yay. And I think this is like a Japanese Shogun thing. So they're coming from the east. So whoever artists this, that's a fascinating picture there. So verse 13, we're told that the 6th trumpet sounds and a voice from the altar before God. Whose voice is this? We don't know. It doesn't really matter. Maybe Christ, maybe an angel. I was just trying to get you guys to think about it. Then he says the 4 horns of the altar, right? Why the 4 horns?
Does that mean it's something you hang on to, or was that something that the sound?
Oh, no, this would have been like yeah, not that you blow through. Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of like the altar that was in front of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the features of the tabernacle was the altar. I think it's the altar of incense that had this, but it has 4 horns on it. I kind of picture it on the sides. I don't know. I can't draw 3-dimensional on a 2D thing. So, but yeah, so we're kind of reflecting that. 4 represent, we can take this as a representation. All right, 4 represents the entire world. Horns generally represent power in apocalyptic literature. And so what we're having here is probably this idea that God has power over all the earth. And come from that power, a voice is saying, release the dogs, or release the horses, or whatever it is that they're going to release, right? Release the angels. Okay. In verse 14 through 19, we're told that the 4 angels bound by the Euphrates are released. There is, I forget where it was, and it's hard for me to look back on my notes, but we've already talked about these angels being bound. We need to know which angels, and maybe, because the only other one that we have riding horses and a group of 4 are the 4 horsemen in Revelation 7. However, I do have a question mark because it's not necessary that these are the same. All right. Oh, yay, I have a map. This map will be fine even though it's Old Testament. It'll show us what we need it to show us. The Euphrates is one of the more important rivers in the ancient world. It is this river right here. Comes down from the Persian Gulf all the way up here into what's called Paddan Aram, or Syria in Jesus' day. On the Euphrates is the town of Babylon right here. And the Euphrates, along with the Tigris River, serve a part of what's called the Fertile Crescent of humanity. And so a lot of civilization grew up around here before spreading out. And it's included in the Garden of Eden as one of the names of the rivers there. In the Roman times, so there's that river here. In Roman times, you will note that here the Euphrates River. It serves as the boundary of the Roman Empire. On the other side are the Parthians, and the Parthians, they were the one empire that really could resist the Romans' invasions. So pretty much everybody else kind of just fell. They didn't go much into Africa because of the Sahara Desert, right? And this is also very much a deserty area. They did have, throughout their history, they did have times in which they did conquer places like Babylon, but they could never actually hold it. The Parthians kept pushing back and defeating them. And so in the minds of a great empire that has had no troubles in conquering all of the Mediterranean world, if you have one people that constantly defeats you, what do you start to think about them? They're evil in some way, right? They're demons, if nothing else, right? And so in that imagery, we have this happening. In the Roman mindset, the Euphrates thoughts often brought terror, and that is exactly what we're about to see here. The time has come for these angels to be released, and we know the time has come because he uses 4 words, right? What are the 4 words? Why didn't he just say the time has come? Yes. We want this to be very clear that the time is now. And we're using this repetition of 4 ideas for the purpose of it's affecting the whole world, right? Like it's a perfection word. The time is perfectly now for this to happen. I'm looking at the wrong one. There we go. The number here is twice 10,000 times 10,000. Not whatever you said. 200 million. It's fine. It's not your fault. It's your translator's fault. So twice 10,000 times 10,000. This is better to kind of communicate the purpose, right, of the number. So rather than 200 million or whatever it was, twice 2,000 times 10,000. 10,000 is a large number, right? One of the biggest numbers that the Romans knew of. And so twice this, it means this is a big army coming, all right? And it's going to cause some destructions. Probably not a literal number. Probably the concept is uncountable and large, and not something you want to go up against, right? Like if I saw 200 million horses like that, I don't care what tank you have, I'm running, right? So yeah. Again, probably not modern warfare. Verse 17, the horses. Yeah, probably not modern warfare machines. There we go. This army is fierce, appalling, and devastating is probably what is being talked about. They have nightmarish looks. Their heads are like that of a lion. The lion was the most lethal animal in the Roman world. And to add to that, they spew fire, smoke, and sulfur, showing their destructive power that they have with them. This definitely does hint at final judgment things. So this one we might see in some regards, right? It's not quite there because they still have a chance to repent. They choose not to, but we are getting definitely near the end with this imagery. We get a couple more ideas that I think are important. The first is a scorpion and snakes, and they have what? Up to this point, we've seen mentioned both scorpions and snakes in these last 2 trumpets. So scorpion in 5, snakes in 6. What is interesting is that the way that the Jews interpreted the judgment of the frogs, so the 3rd plague of Egypt was frogs. the way that the Jews in John's day were interpreting it was that frogs wasn't exactly it, right? Frogs are not that scary for most people. My wife gives me a weird look when I said that. So frogs are not usually that scary, right? And so they were trying to explain why the Egyptians were upset about the frogs other than them being everywhere, right? And so what they came to is that they were snakes and scorpions instead. How they got there, I don't know. And so at least in John's writing, it's hinting at the thought patterns of the Jewish people at this time. They are allowed to kill here. How many are they allowed to kill? A third killed by the army. This is just an intensification of the seals. The seals, a fourth were killed. Now we have a third. And so what would we expect next? A half, which I've already said doesn't happen, but there's probably a reason for it, which we get to talk about next week. So, now it does say that the power comes from their mouth, and I think this is probably the important thing that we should take from this trumpet, okay? The enemy will fight with words and ideas. What is hurting the church more than anything else right now is the war of words. What drives a person out of the church more often than not is the ideas of the world. Hey, look, I'm going to talk about this. I already answered this already. I've already said it a little bit. This idea that you are perfect, you are born perfect. Like that is an idea I think that's hurting the church right now. There's more than just that, but I think that's one that we need to recognize. So I won't repeat what I just said, but I have it right here. So the world will lie to your children, to you, so don't be surprised. Like when we're celebrating things like unholy, like that's a lie that we need to be aware of. And it's the words, the mouth, the power of these words and ideas that we have to be kind of aware of and against. And so we do have to understand that. And I think that's something that we can talk about here. Revelation 20 through 21 is a summary verse. And it is common to the Old Testament discussion on idols, okay? The common polemic in the Old Testament of idols is they're made of materials, they cannot talk, they cannot hear, they cannot see, not in the ocean, but see with their eyes, and they cannot walk. So I spelled that C wrong, I'm sorry. So, all right, and so that's the polemic, and yet what does verse 21 say? They refuse to repent. They refuse to repent. What's that? This is why I say it's close to the end, but it's not the end. And I think everybody has a chance to repent until Jesus comes back. They still won't.
That's what I was thinking. It's kind of amazing. If you got this thing in front of you that has the head of a lion, it's breathing fire.
It's killed a third of the people.
Go, not be on the aggressive end of that. I think I would want to find salvation wherever I could in that case. So it astounds me that they still will not repent.
What's the scripture that says that it's going to call for the rocks and the mountains to come down?
Yeah, that was chapter 7, I think. And it's the same thing. We'd rather hide than admit that God is powerful and real and worthy of our worship. I still go back to, I think this is kind of a commentary on Egypt in some ways, right? So when we look at Egypt, Moses tells them, hey, there's going to be hell from the sky, and it's going to devastate everything. You probably should get your animals inside. And what do the Egyptians do?
They ignored him.
They ignore it. And they've already seen. I mean, I think that's 8, right? So they've already seen water into blood, lice, flies, boils, frogs. I mean, they've already seen all these things, and they say, we're good. We'll take our chances.
They must be idiots.
And it's not that. It really isn't about how smart or dumb they are, right? It's really a spiritual issue, right? And I think that's what John's trying to communicate here is if you are stuck in idolatry, if you are, as a Christian, compromising with idolatry, all that it is doing is hardening your heart to the point that you will get to a spot where you won't even choose to repent. Not because you're not given the option, but because you just won't. And that's where Pharaoh was. Why doesn't he let the people go?
He was stuck in idolatry.
He was stuck in idolatry. I'm the God. I mean, Pharaoh was considered a God. I am the God. You know, I don't know who this guy is. And even after, the Red Sea incident is still a part of that, right? Like it's the 11th plague. And he's coming after them because, we made a mistake. We need them back. He's not coming to kill them. He's coming to usher them back into slavery, you know, and he's still unwilling to admit that God is God. And so, I think what we see, it's easier for people to continue to worship their idols than it is for them to follow God. At least in their mind, it's easier. And yet Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, because my yoke is light. And so while we may feel that it's easier to follow the idols of the world, Jesus truly is easier and better. All right, I have here, see the Egyptians, which we talked about. So what do we learn?
Some people still get stuck in idolatry even after all the turmoil it cost them.
Yes, good job. That's what I said. Despite judgments, people will continue to worship their idols.
I guess old habits do die hard.
Old habits die hard. That's a good. And I 100% believe this. It takes the power of God to overcome the idols in our lives. And if we're not willing to rely upon Him, even as Christians, it's hard for us sometimes to break the habits that we've formed and created. Yes. Yes, as the other passage said, right? Like, you don't have to deal with this. Just have the seal, right?